I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are here today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So, welcome to Recycling 101. In this session, hopefully you will learn, if you're very proficient, you will probably know some of these things, but if you're not, hopefully you will learn a few things or two. So, before we begin, if you can please scan this code. Hopefully everybody is really familiar with QR codes, but if you can just scan these, and if you can please answer, who do you think is the one who generates the most waste? I'm also going to be sending a link on the chat box. So if you cannot scan that code, just click on the link and that should take you over there. So these are how results are currently going. Yeah, construction, households, businesses. Okay. So most of you are correct. I'll just go ahead. So the sector that generates the most waste is actually construction and demolition. So out of all the waste that Australia creates is 61.5 million tons per year. 27 of those of that waste is generated by the construction and demolition. Please keep in mind that this is mostly by weight. So obviously, if you demolish a building, that's going to be a lot more heavy or just heavier than packaging that we generate. By cancels, I mean households. Households generate 12.6 million tons, but that's not the second one. The second sector that generates the most waste is actually businesses. So this is just to give you a bit of a perspective of how these, of the waste, I guess, sector in Australia. Now, in terms of the types of waste that we generate, this is, again, just to give you a brief overview of what type of waste we create. And here you can see most of that is made by masonry materials. Again, that's because of the construction and waste, construction and demolition sector. But also you can see that organics, there's a big chunk of organic waste that we are generating. So, and plastics, even though that's not as much, keep in mind that this is what we can collect. This is not taking into account of that plastic that ends up in the environment. But I really wanted to show you this so that you are not blinded by our plastic problem, which is big, it's really massive, but that should not detract you from other materials that we are also generating, because it's still quite a lot of that stuff that we're generating. Whenever we talk about waste management, we should always look into account the waste hierarchy. So that is what are the best things that we can do? And obviously, avoid is the first thing that we should be looking at. Reduce the amount of waste that we generate. That's the best thing you can do. Reuse, recycle and compost. Waste to energy, so that's pretty much burning stuff so that we can create energy. It is important to know that waste to energy is not a renewable energy source. And finally, landfill. And I'm showing you this because recycling should never be the main, or even though this is National Recycling Week, it should not be the first thing that you think about if you want to reduce, if you want to be a good waste warrior, however you want to call yourself. Reducing and refusing waste, that should be the first priority. So what are the non-recyclable items that we have that we can swap for reusable ones? And by non-recyclable, what I mean is non-recyclable at home. So the first thing would be coffee cups. Coffee cups, you can recycle them. There's certain special programs that can take them, but generally you cannot really put them in your home recycling bin. But this is one of the easiest swaps that you can do. I mean, this is a single-use item, so if you can choose a reusable option, even you don't even have to have like a fancy takeaway cup. Like a glass jar works perfectly fine. But yeah, like that's one of the easiest things that you can do. And one of the things that you probably could be doing every single day. The second one is cutlery. So cutlery, chopsticks, doesn't matter what they're made of, they're not recyclable. If we put them in a recycling bin, they're not going to get sorted correctly. They will be considered as a contaminant in a recycling bin, and that really will end up in landfill. And the reason why they're not recyclable is because they have the wrong shape, and also the ones that are made out of plastic, they tend to be made out of really low quality plastic. So it's not a lot that we can do with that once it's processed. So yeah, again, like a very good alternative, just use whatever you have at home. Third one, napkins. Napkins are not recyclable. There's two reasons. The first one is because generally napkins, you use it to wipe your mouth or wipe stuff around. So by doing that, there's already contaminants in the napkins like sauces or just like food leftovers. Even let's assume that you had a pack of napkins completely new and you don't know what to do with that, you cannot put those in your recycling bin. And that is because napkins, the paper fibers of napkins, they're very short. So if we process them, they cannot really bond together correctly because they're so short, they will break. What you can do with napkins is, if you have them, paper napkins, you can compost them, but you definitely cannot recycle them. An alternative, of course, is cloth napkins. I personally did the switch on during lockdown. So yeah, it's something that you can get used to very, very easily as well. Third one is paper bags. So paper bags, or soft plastic, should I say. I mean, this is such an easy thing to get a reusable option for. They cannot be recycled at home. They can be taken back to soft plastics at Coles or Woolworths, but definitely they should never, ever, ever go in your recycling bin. If you put them in your recycling bin, they will just cause a big mess, and it's not going to be nice. Cling wrap, that's another option that you can have a reusable swap. Cling wrap, again, is not recyclable, and only certain brands of cling wrap can be accepted by those of plastics bins that I just mentioned, and they always have to be clean and dry. So even if you use like those like accept brands, if you're wrapping I don't know, like if you're putting that on top of like a soup container or something, it's gonna get all dirty and messy, and probably like you won't be able to recycle it anyway. So try to use a reusable option. Beeswax, that's a great option. There's also like silicone lids with different sizes that you can keep on reusing. So that's a very good option. And finally, receipts. So receipts they can be recycled. The problem with receipts is that most of them, not all of them, but most of them, they have PFAS. So with PFAS, these are like these forever chemicals. So if we put them in the recycling bin, because we don't know what type of receipts they are, those chemicals will transfer into the other paper items. So it's better not to have them, unless, you know, if you are at work and you need it for like expenses, claims, things like that, then fine. But if you don't really need a receipt, try just to get an electronic copy. So why should we recycle? We have seen so many issues in the past years about recycling. So why should we even bother doing that? Well, actually recycling, it's very important for the Australian economy. We recycle 37 million tons of materials, which is around 60% of what we generate. It's not all, that's for sure, but still we recycle quite a lot of things. We can improve, and there's a lot of work in the background to make this happen. But still, it is very important for the Australian economy and to create jobs. It is more expensive to send, and it's getting more expensive to send waste to landfill rather than recycling it. And this is because states, they have waste levies, which means that whenever I want to dump something into landfill, I have to pay for it. I have to pay like an additional, let's call it tax if you want to. So it's just getting easier and easier just to recycle it instead. And also, finally, there's around 100 MRFs, and I'll tell you what a MRF stands for. Is pretty much the sorting facilities that are operating in Australia. So it just doesn't make sense to send everything to landfill. We have to keep those facilities operating as well. Now, we have another question. So if you can, again, either click on here or else let me know if you cannot have access. But can you please select which is the fastest growing waste in Australia? Which one do you think it is? Just do it myself as well. Okay, and this is how it's currently going. All right. I mean, this is pretty obvious. Most people think is e-waste, and you are correct. E-waste is the fastest growing type of waste that we have in Australia. Roughly, we generate around 21 kilograms of e-waste per person every single year. So it's one of the highest in the world, which is not great. So there's a few things that we can do about that. Obviously, the first one is try to reduce the amount of e-waste that we generate. So maybe we don't have to have a new phone every single year. That's an example. But also these are different ways of how you can recycle it. So with mobile phones, you can recycle it for free with Mobile Master. So yeah, just if you go to recycling near you, just look for mobile phones and it will tell you all the closest drop-off locations. And most like mobile phone stores and telecommunication stores, they will have a mobile master bin, so you can take them there. TVs, computers, and accessories, you can recycle them via Tech Collect or eCycle. Again, you can go to recycling near you to find your closest drop-off location. Office Works, they also have like a big like wall in a lot of their stores where you can drop different types of e-waste. And lastly, batteries, you can take them back to most Aldi stores, Battery World stores. Some Woolworths shops have them, as well as some Office Works, as I mentioned before. Batteries is actually all of them. They're particularly important to recycle because if you put them in your normal recycling bin or even your general waste bins, batteries can create fires. And just imagine a fire either on landfill or in the recycling sorting facility is just going to mess everything up. And then that's how we see all those news about fires at MRFs. So it's very important to dispose of our batteries properly and correctly. Now, let's go to the next question. The number in the triangle, does that mean that I can recycle my packaging? Yes or no? Okay. It was a bit 50-50 before, now not so sure. And I'll just go back to the presentation. It's actually false, as most of you have said. The number in the triangle, it only refers to the type of plastic or polymer that that particular piece of, it can be packaging, it could be anything, it could be a toy. What type of polymer that it's made of. So if it says the number 1, it means that it's made out of PET. Number 2, it's made out of HDPE. So it's really just a classification of that packaging. There's so many things that can affect the recyclability of plastics, and just the material, that's just not enough to know whether or not we can process that through our cancelled collections. And sorry, I should mention I'll talk about the ARL later, but the Australian recycling label at this stage is really the only evidence-based recycling label that we have for packaging that we know that we can follow. Okay, and this is the last question. I think I have a very good audience. So if you can please select whether or not you can that good or bad? Excellent. Yeah, so I mean, we see a lot of people saying, yes, I mean, I'm sending, I don't know, I'm throwing away my banana peel and it's just going to the grate, it's going to disappear, which is a good thing, right? Well, actually, no, it's pretty bad, as most of you say here. Is really, really bad. And the reason why this is bad is because whenever we throw away organic waste, and this is not just food waste, but it's any sort of organic waste. So this could also apply to our garden waste, sometimes even paper. So whenever we throw that to landfill, it degrades, or it breaks down, should I say, without oxygen. And that creates a process that generates methane. And methane is a greenhouse gas that is a lot more potent than CO2 emissions. And if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. And this would be just right behind the US and China and before India. So just think about all like those countries, how much we see that the amount of CO2 emissions that generates. Food waste, it's just up there. It's crazy. So if there's one thing that you can take away from this session is, if you want to tackle one type of waste and you can only do one, and the one that will probably have the biggest impact in terms of carbon footprint, it will be organic. And there is some of the solutions that you can do to tackle organic. So FOGO, that's the easiest one, and I wish I had one. So FOGO stands for Food Organics, Garden Organics. So that is the council bin. So some councils, they provide collections for food waste, which is great. If you don't have that, because not everybody does, you can have different options. So one of them, obviously, it's a compost bin at home. So this is a good idea if you have a garden, because you need a balance between food scraps and also like leaves and just like the dry stuff. So you need a balance of those. Worm farm, this is a good idea for apartments. You cannot put everything in your worm farm, only like veggie scraps, and that's it. But again, that's a very good option for apartments where you don't have a lot of space. Community compost bins, there are some communities that have like a community garden, and they tend to have compost bins, so you can potentially drop your stuff in there. You will probably have to do some work as well as a retribution, but I mean, if that's available to you, you could also even potentially have some fresh produce that is given to you. There is an app that is called Share Waste. You can check that out, and it will tell you people who are hopefully near you who can accept your organic waste, because those people may have either a worm farm or a compost bin or something, so they can take your organic waste. So just check that in there and see if that person is willing to take it. And finally, bokashi. Now this is great because you can put pretty much everything. So you can put meat leftovers, you can put bones, you can put everything. It is a little bit more like time intensive. I personally don't like it, but that's just a personal preference. If you do have the time, and then if you have a space where you can put everything that had fermented afterwards, it is a great option. And as I mentioned, you can pretty much break down everything, including bones and meat, which you cannot do with the other ones. So where does it all go? Once we put everything in our recycling bin, what happens? It goes to the materials recovery facility, and it's important to know that this is not the recycling facility. So this is just a place where we sort all our waste, and it's called materials recovery facility, and it stands for MRF. So I'm just gonna play a video of how a MRF works. Each MRF is different, but this gives you just a good overview of how everything works.
Sorting your recycling, brought to you by Planet Ark. After recycling is collected from your curbside, it's taken to a materials recovery facility and loaded onto conveyor belts where contaminants and non-recyclables like clothing and plastic bags are removed by hand. The recyclables pass through sorting machines designed to separate out the different material types. Large fans are used to blow paper into a collection area. The plastic, steel, glass and aluminium containers continue along another conveyor belt where magnets are used to remove steel cans and aerosols. The remaining items then pass through a series of plastic sorting machines. Optical scanners use light to identify the different types of plastic, and then jets of air separate them. A magnetic field is used to generate an electric current called an eddy current in the aluminium, which causes it to be pushed away and separated from other materials. At the end of the separation process, glass is loaded into trucks, while the other materials are made into bales for transportation to reprocessing facilities. All the materials are made or recycled into new products. A lot of other items are recyclable but can't go into your household recycling bin because they're too complicated or they contaminate the recycling processes. There are free and easily accessible drop-off points for many of these items, including printer cartridges, mobile phones, computers and accessories, and TVs. The manufacturers of these items pay for them to be recycled. You can even take your old plastic shopping bags, biscuit packets, and other soft plastics to selected supermarkets to be turned into furniture. So check with your local council or recyclingnearyou.com.au to find out what can go in your recycling bin at home, as well as drop-off locations for printer cartridges, mobile phones, computers, plastic bags, and more.
Okay, so as you can see, our recycling bin at home is pretty much just for containers and packaging. That's pretty much it. And packaging that comes from, and paper, of course, like newspapers, things like that. But it's just for, really just for packaging that comes either from our kitchen, our bathroom, or our laundry. Anything else, it's debatable whether or not you should be putting that, and probably like I wouldn't. And this is so that we can keep a clean stream. So what can they become? What happens? Like, what can they be turned into? So a plastic bottle, of course, it goes into a plastic bottle. And I should probably mention, as before, when I mentioned the waste hierarchy, we have recycling, and even recycling packaging to packaging has probably a higher value than recycling packaging to a different item. So plastic bottles, they can be turned again into plastic bottles, and also clothing. Steel can that can be turned into, again, steel cans or some parts of a fridge. They also use that for that. Aluminum can, that can be used for like airplanes, cars, and of course more aluminum cans. Newspaper that usually is used to create a kitty litter. That's really good for kitty litter. And finally, cardboard boxes, generally that they're turned again into cardboard boxes, or they can also be turned into kitty litter. So there's just like so many things that we can do with that. I don't have it in here, but with soft plastics, that as you saw on the video, you can see that that's turned mostly into a like benches and things like that. They cannot be turned into soft plastics again. At least not manually, only if we recycle them chemically, but that's pretty much it. So what are the 6 most common recycling mistakes, and why it is very important to avoid these so that we can achieve that? So the first one is soft plastics. I already mentioned this, soft plastics in a recycling bin, that's a big no-no, and that includes plastic bags, chip packets, chocolate wrappers, anything that you can pretty much just scrunch. And it's very important not to put this in a recycling bin because they messed up the machines at the sorting facilities, and they're just not going to get recycled. If you put them in there, it's just not going to happen, and you're just going to create a big problem down the line. The other one is recyclables inside a bag. This one is very common. And I can see that most people here are quite passionate about recycling, and I'm pretty sure you've seen some of your neighbors do this. It's very important not to do this because, as you saw on that video, each individual piece of packaging gets separated individually. So if we put them in a bag, how like, you know, if we have different plastic bags and cans and like newspaper, how is that going to get sorted if we cannot sort them out individually? People don't really have the time to go through the bags, and also just for safety reasons, is because you don't know what's inside the bag. So if anything inside a bag, that will probably get tossed out. Food and organics, that should never go in your recycling bin. That's especially detrimental for paper. Non-recyclable plastics. So this is an important one. And this is, again, going back to the fact that our recycling bin is only for packaging. So we cannot really put any items that are, even though they're made out of plastic, but they're not packaging. And that is glasses, like I mentioned before, the cutlery, toys, hangers, things like that. We cannot really put those in there because they are the wrong shape. And also they tend to have additional materials than just plastic, for example. So with glasses, for instance, like you have the frame, but then you also have like, I don't know, like the glass. With toys, it could only be plastic, but it could also have like a battery, or it could have some springs, or just different materials like, I don't know, wood or something like that. So that should never go in there. Hangers, they're just the wrong shape. They're not gonna get picked up. The other one is expanded polystyrene. Again, this should never go in your recycling bin. You can, especially like if you buy like a big TV or something, sometimes they do come like with those big pieces of expanded polystyrene. If you have a transfer station nearby, you can take it there, but there's not a lot of them. So if you have that available close to you, that's a really good option. And finally, clothing and nappies. People do put some clothing and nappies that should never go in your recycling bin, and I'll tell you how to recycle these later. Well, not nappies, just clothing, but yeah, you should not be putting this in there. Now, I'll talk hopefully quickly about the Australasian recycling label and why this is a very important thing to know. So why do we need another label? This is why. At the moment, there are so many random labels out there. They don't really mean much, only that something can be recycled somewhere, somehow, but it doesn't really reflect the recycling infrastructure that we have in the country, nor the demand for those materials. So this is what the ARL does. It takes into account the technical recyclability of an item. So that's considering the materials, as mentioned, what type of plastic or glass, what type of glass, and so on, the shape and dimensions of that piece of packaging, its weight, any inks and colorants, as well as any glues and bondings. But we know that this is not enough, especially because in Australia, each council accepts different things. So we also take into account the what is accepted by councils, and we call these curbside access labels. So provided that that piece of packaging is technically recyclable, if more than 80% of the population can recycle something, then it will have a recyclable classification. Between 60 and 80%, that will be conditionally recyclable. So people will be prompted to check with their local council whether or not they can recycle something. And then finally, less than 60%, then that is considered not recyclable. So these are the thresholds, and in case you don't know, this is good so that you can see there's a lot of evidence and a lot of governance behind this program to make sure that it is as accurate as possible. So yeah, so we're trying really hard to harmonize recycling labeling across Australia. So what does it mean? There's three classifications, as mentioned before. The one with the black or the opaque recycling symbol, that means that that piece of that component of your packaging is recyclable, and you can chuck that in your recycling bin as it is, and that's good to go. If it has the clear recycling symbol, it means that it is conditional recyclable. So you can recycle it only if you follow the instructions underneath. In this case, this is probably like a soft plastic, so it will tell you to take it back to a store, meaning Coles or Woolworths. But let's say that you have aluminum foil. It will tell you to scrunch it into a bowl. Because if you want to recycle aluminum foil, that's what you have to do. Or if you have a very, very sturdy cardboard box, like the ones where your mobiles come in, it will tell you to flatten that because it has to be flat. So for and this is just for you to know, for you to be able to recycle paper, or when paper is sorted, should I say, it needs to be flat. If it has a 3D shape, it's not going to get sorted properly. So if it's something very sturdy that won't crush easily, that's probably going to end up with another container. And finally, the one with the bin symbol, that means that that is not recyclable at curbside, so that has to go in your bin, unfortunately. This is a good example of how that label works. So if you see here, I don't know if you want to, I see there's a lot of conversation, and so I cannot keep up with all of it, but if you can just write, how would you dispose of this piece of packaging? What do you think you should be doing? I can see there's a lot of questions around foil. Okay, so this is the label that you will see on that particular piece of packaging. So it says the bottle, you can recycle it, but you have to remove the trigger, and the trigger is not recyclable. So that has to go in your recycling bin. So now I'm going to show you a very similar item. Like, do you think this would have the same instructions to recycle the bottle and to remove the trigger? Okay, I'll just go to the next one. So in this case, however, the bottle is recyclable and so is the trigger. This is so to give you a good example of how, even though sometimes pieces of packaging look the same, or they could look the same, they will have different recyclability classifications. In this case, I would assume generally triggers cannot be recycled because they have a metal spring. So you cannot really recycle them with the rest of the plastics because of that spring. And what some brands have done is to replace that string with a plastic one, so everything is just one material and it's easier to recycle. And this is my last example, I promise, of how would you dispose of this piece of packaging. So you have your top, the lid, and then you have this like aluminum foil lid that goes in here. I will just show you the ARL. Tells you the top, you can recycle it as is. The lid, if you want to recycle it, you have to leave it attached. And that's again because it's very flat. So if we just leave that flat in there, the machines will think that's paper because it's 2D, and that will probably end up with the paper, and it's very light and it's very small. So if we want to recycle that, we have to reattach it to the top. With larger lids, that's probably not necessary, but just because this one, because it's so flat and so light and so small, then yes. The foil, you have to scrunch it into a ball. It's with foil scrunching, it has to be at least around the size of a golf ball. So if you have, like those small chocolate wrappers, like the ones that come with like Easter eggs and those things, probably you won't be able to make a ball that big with just one. So you just keep on adding foil until it becomes like, it doesn't have to be as big as your fist, but just like a golf size, it's good enough. So what to do with everything, like non-packaging items that we cannot recycle at home? There's different things that we still can do and different programs. So the first one is for our household items, there are different programs that can recycle your mattresses. You will probably have to pay for them. There are some mattresses companies that can, like if you buy the mattress from them, they come and pick up your old mattress and they do it for free. So if you do ever change your mattress, check if they have this type of policy. But if not, Soft Landings, they're the ones who recycle mattresses. Coffee capsules, this is a free program, so you can recycle those. Just look for the nearest drop-off location. Chemicals and paint as well. Sometimes you have to pay, sometimes you don't, depending on the facility. So if you go to recycling near you, just check your closest one and see if that facility will accept it for free or if you will have to pay a small fee. Clothing, you can take all clothing. I mean, if it's completely has a lot of holes, if it cannot be donated, and remember donations are good only if they are in good sellable condition. If not, please don't. But clothing, you can take them back to H&M or Zara. U Apparel also takes some clothing, and I believe shoes, although you have to pay for that one, but it's an option. H&M and Zara, they don't charge you. And also like linen and towels, things like that. You can, for towels especially, vets and animal shelters, they like to get those. So if you have one nearby, or if you know of anyone who has one, ask them if they want any. If not, if you don't have anywhere or no one to give them to, you can take them back to Sheridan stores. They will take those for recycling. And finally, construction and demolition. I'm just putting this in here in case you ever do a renovation at home, you can recycle all of that debris. Bingo is one of our partners. They do a lot of construction and demolition recycling. So you just check any waste contractors to see if they provide that service. E-waste, as mentioned before, cartridges, just a plug-in for one of our programs, the cartridges for Planet Arc. This is a good option for offices mostly. Also mobile phones, as mentioned before, with mobile muster, the batteries, light gloves, you can also recycle those. So some councils, they have like special bins in their offices. Some IKEA stores, you can also take them there. Office Works. So yeah, just again, check recycling near you and see what is the closest drop-off location. And the same for computers and accessories. And finally, I have these like other / miscellaneous items. So stationery, pens, markers, things like that, that can be taken back to Office Works. Bread tags as well. There's some programs that can take them. You cannot put them in your recycling bin because they're too small. Although I believe in South Australia, you are allowed to put them inside a larger container, but that's pretty much it because they do all the sorting by hand. But if I probably wouldn't do it if you're not allowed. Personal care, so by this I really mean like oral care, really like toothbrushes and things like that. There's some, these last three, they're programs run by TerraCycle. You just have to make sure that they are still running because they come and go, so just make sure that they're still good. Beauty care, so by beauty care really is mostly like makeup. So with makeup, you definitely cannot put them in your recycling bin. So makeup items like eyeshadow palettes, mascara, things like that, you can take them to certain places. David Jones, I believe they have like those bins as well as Priceline. And finally, blister packs, you can take them, well, actually, no, you have to ship them to some stores. They take them like Flora and Fauna and BioMe, they take those. And this is what a collection setup could look like for those like random pieces of, well, just items. Now that most of us are going back into the office and to work, it could be a good idea to set this up at work so that you give your staff, because probably you don't want to go, you don't want to travel a lot just to drop off one toothbrush. But if you're going to go to work because you have to go there anyway, it is more likely that you will take it and recycle it, for instance. So that's just an idea. And oh, sorry, I don't know why this came up just now. I'll just know how to get rid of this one, sorry. Very important, unless we are buying it back, we are not really recycling. So it's very important to know the difference between recyclable and recycled. So recyclable is something that can be collected, sorted and turned into new items. And as mentioned, the ARL is one of the things that you can look for to know whether or not you can recycle something. But also, you like whenever you can, you should be looking for items that have recycled content. So this is something that has already recyclable materials in them. So that's to go the full circle. And generally they have claims like made with X% of recycled materials. However, it's good to know what is recycled content and the different types of recycled content that are available. The first one is post-manufactured recycled content, and this is the most common type of recycled content that is used specifically for packaging. So this is pretty much just like Scrap materials that are recovered from the manufacturing stage, so they never really reach the consumer, and they're never turned into something. So let's say that it's just like flakes of things. So this tends to be very good quality, and this tends to be very clean as well. So it's really easy to use this type of recycled content. Then we have pre-consumer, which is, let's say that you created a piece of packaging, especially big brands that have really big like sale volumes. They tend to buy heaps and heaps and like tons, I guess, of packaging. And sometimes maybe they change the artwork so they cannot use that anymore, or maybe that piece of packaging was defective, so they had to throw it away. So it's something that was created, but it never reached the consumer because of whatever reasons. So that can also be recycled back. It is not as easy to recycle this, but it's probably cleaner than post-consumer recycled content, or easier to process, I guess. Post-consumer recycled content, it is the hardest type of recycled content that we have, or that to process. And this is something that had, it was manufactured, it was produced into probably packaging, the consumer used it, we put in the recycling bin, and then that is turned into new things. So whenever brands, they claim we're using recycled materials, it's good to know what type of recycled materials we have. Some people say post-consumer recycled content really is the one that matters. I think all of them matters because, as you saw before, businesses are the second sector that creates the most waste. So really, we should be looking at all those different levels. But just because we are using post-manufacturing recycled content, that should not just, like, brands shouldn't just be saying, okay, I'm done. Like, there's always room of improvement so that we can include all of these and to make consumer efforts worthwhile. So to sum up, just rethink the way we think about waste, because really it's not waste, there are resources. I like to say waste is not waste until it's wasted. Refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, repair, all of those R's before we even think about recycling. We do have to tackle our plastic issue, but please don't forget about food and organic waste. Recommend to make one change at a time. If you make all of those changes at once, you will probably get overwhelmed and you might not follow through with all of them. So just get really good at something, and then once you master that, then go to the next one. Whenever you can, swap non-recyclable items for reusable ones. Check for the Australian recycling label before you chalk your packaging. And just because if you don't see the ARL on your packaging today, it doesn't mean that it won't be there in the next few months. So keep on checking that. Just as an FYI, by the end of 2023, we expect that 80% of products on supermarket shelves will have the ARL. So that's very good. Buy it back, because it doesn't really matter if we recycle and if we go through all these efforts if we are not creating those markets and the demand for that type of materials. A reminder that individual actions do have an impact, and it does matter, and it's not just about the environmental impact but also the social one. So if people are seeing you and if they look at you and they see all of the things and all the effort that you do, you can influence them and you can create and you can like make a social norm about doing this, and then more people will be influenced by your actions and will hopefully change their behavior. And as I said, waste is not waste until it's wasted. So now question time. So I didn't really think through how we're gonna do this. I wasn't expecting these many questions. So I'll just go to the top, and I think Maddie, our events coordinator, she's going to be gathering all the questions that I do not answer. I'll just stop sharing the screen. It's just me. So if I don't answer your question, please send us another one later. But I can see one here from MJ, sorry. Where can you recycle old underwear? You can, as long as it's clean, place to clean your underwear before you recycle it. So you can take them back to Sarah or H&M. They would take those. They would be probably be shredded, because obviously you cannot really do much with that. They will probably be shredded and be used for like for construction with the what is it called? Oh God, I forgot. Like the layer used so that it doesn't, so that it's not called insulation. There you go. They turn that into insulation. There's another one. Wouldn't most papers and cardboard be contaminated with food, water, and oils when they are mixed with other products in the recycling truck and therefore make them unrecyclable? Yeah, so that's why our packaging, whenever we dispose of packaging, it has to be empty. So a good example with oils and things like that would be pizza boxes. So if you, let's say, if you order a meat lovers pizza, probably like, because even like sometimes even the top gets all that grease, it gets all completely soaked in grease and oil, so you probably cannot recycle that. But sometimes the pizza is not as greasy, and that applies to packaging in general. So what you can do is you can tear the pizza box in half. So the top, because it has really minor oils and food residue, that can go into recycling bin, but the bottom, then if you have a FOCO bin, like the food organic garden organics from your cancels, you can put that in there. But if not, then that would probably have to go to landfill. Once plastic meal bottles are washed out, do you recycle them with the lid on or off? This is such a great question. They don't need to be washed off, by the way. They just need to be empty. So as long as, if it has like a couple of drops of milk, that's completely fine. You don't need to super clean everything. A quick rinse with, especially with sauces, maybe like a rinse with gray water, that's more than enough. With the lid, it is a hot topic and there's not a lot of consistency around that. Check with your local council whether or not they take that. I know in Western Australia, and I'm pretty sure in South Australia, they just say no. But what you can do is you can scrunch the bottle, except in Western Australia and South Australia, and replace the cap. And by doing this, what you're doing is, the problem with lids is that they're too small. And when they go into the MRF, the bottle gets crushed because there's air inside, and then the lid will pop up. So it can potentially hurt someone, and or it's just too small. So it won't be collected. So by scrunching the bottle, you're removing all of that air. So if it gets crushed, like there's nothing to pop out because there's nowhere to pop the lid out. So that's something that you can do if you want to recover the lid. Can you put Tetra Pak soy milk in the recycling bin? I assume this is long life cartons. So fresh cartons, which is what you find in the fridge at the supermarkets, that is widely accepted by most councils. So that's an easy one. Everything that is long life, so those are the ones that are not refrigerated and that last very long. You have to check with your local council because not all of them are accepting them. However, there's really good news. Tetra Pak, they are they're investing in a recycling plant that hopefully will be up and running in June, like mid next year, and we will be able to recycle all types of cartons, which is great. At the moment, the way cartons are recycled is with the paper. So all that cardboard box, because it's the vast majority of that packaging, we remove all those fibers, and then that fibers become another carton or another cardboard box. The lining that are in those cartons, that cannot get recycled through that process. So with this new plant that we're going to be having next year, we will be able to recycle the whole thing, including, sometimes like those like small like juice boxes with a straw. You can even recycle the straw, you can put it in there, but that's until next year. So stay tuned. We actually have an article about that new plan that is coming up. So make sure if you're interested to have a read. It's really interesting and it's very good. And what they create these really cool like building blocks. So yeah, that's going to be a very good solution for that thing. Are we thinking of how to recycle if disposing face masks? That is a very, very good question. Generally, you cannot recycle them. I know TerraCycle, they offer boxes to collect them. You have to pay for those boxes though, so have a look, see if there's anyone around you who can collect them through those boxes. You can check their website, but generally at this stage we don't really, there's no solution for it. So the best thing you can do, if possible, is just to use a reusable mask. Obviously, if you're a frontline worker, you probably cannot do that, but if you are just an average person like myself, that's something that you can look into. Can you recycle old pillows that are not in good condition? Not really. Those, unfortunately, you cannot accept. Share doesn't accept those. You can check again with vets or animal shelters and see if they want it, and see if that's good enough. Alternatively, if you are crafty, you can potentially remove all the stuffing from inside and reuse that stuffing to stuff like a cushion or something. That's something that you can see so that you don't generate that waste. But yeah, generally we don't have a recycling solution for that. Where can I recycle or drop off household oil? That's a good one. Generally, you can only do it at some transfer stations. So if you go, so I'm just going to be promoting Recycling Near You a lot here. If you go to recyclingnearyou.com.au, just check, you just have to put in your postcode and then just select the material cooking oil, and it will tell you all of the different places where you can take that back to. And finally, I see what's happening with all the, assuming like the PPE from the pandemic. I'm assuming you're referring to the face mask. That's very likely ending up in landfills, unfortunately, right now. Okay. What happens to mobile phones drop at Basco's recycling facilities? I drop off a box at Granville, but not sure what happens with them. I'm not really sure what type of collections that particular facility has, but I assume if they are working with Mobile Muster, it will definitely get recovered. So Mobile Muster is a stewardship program, so they have to recycle it. So I think they have, if I'm correct, at least 95% recovery rate. So everything that goes to Mobile Muster, it does get recycled because they have to do it. So highly recommended to drop off your mobile phones if you have them with them. I think we only have, actually we've gone over time a little bit, so we have an additional 5 minutes. I'll just go through some of the questions that we have on the chat box. There's some comments here, and I think some people have already answered those questions with cling wrap. As mentioned before, only certain brands can be taken. And the reason is not all soft plastics can be taken back to recycle. And if you see the ARL saying that you cannot, please don't do them. And this is because just like hard plastics, soft plastics have a different melting point. So recycle have different thresholds of the types of plastics that they can accept, as well as the quantities that they can accept of those particular types of polymers. So because everything is, all mixed up, it's not like they can have like a clean batch of just PET or a clean batch of just LDPE. So that's why it's very important to follow the label with cling wrap. Only a few brands can have like the accepted or acceptable types of plastic. But it always has to be clean and dry. That's important. If it has any food left over or if it's wet, it's going to create mold, and that is very detrimental to their process. Okay, I think hopefully that's it. And probably I've missed some of the things. Oh, there's a good question here, like why isn't every single council accepting food waste? And there was a very good question here from Alaric. Thank you, Alaric, answering this. Sometimes it is like logistically it's not as easy, especially with contracts and things like that. It's not as easy because the contracts, the waste contracts, they can be like a 10-year long contract. So adding services to that is just not as easy. You also have to take into account the demographics, well, not the demographics, I should say, the like the businesses slash residential ratio of that, because businesses obviously they don't generate as much organic waste as a residential area would. So obviously it's more cost effective to collect food waste and organics from a residential area, but if it's highly dense by mostly offices, let's say, it's not going to be as cost effective. So there's a few barriers when it comes to organics, but it can be done. And that's something that I know a lot of councils are looking into, because landfill is filling up and organics is one of the things that we know that we can, I mean, I wouldn't say process easily, but it's easier than plastic. But it has to be very clean. So organic waste or organics processors, they don't really accept a lot of contaminated waste, because I mean, you know, let's say that you're a farmer and you're going to buy compost from that organic waste. You really don't want any like random pieces of plastic or, you know, metal things in there. So that's why it's very important to have that super ultra clean. Okay, I don't think I've answered all of those, but what we'll do is we'll just get all these questions that I haven't answered and just put them in a FAQ document and send it back. I highly recommend if you check our show tomorrow. We have a plastics recycling committee show, so that closes, the registrations closes at 3 today. So make sure that you check those out if you want to have a bit of a laugh and not be so serious like where we're right now. And also follow all our social stuff like Instagram, Facebook. We tend to post a lot of things in there and we try to answer as many questions as we can. So yes, please do that if you're interested. And yeah, a reminder that this is going to be recorded and this session and this will be on our YouTube account in case you want to watch it again or if you want to show it to someone. That will be all. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a lovely day.